The first punch never landed. It hovered in the hallway air, trembling between decision and regret, as though it already understood the lifetime of echoes it would unleash. Lila Ali froze 3 paces from the doorway, sweat from the August heat collecting at her hairline, sneakers squeaking on cracked linoleum that smelled of bleaching powder and old blood. Beyond the frame she saw the ring, ropes bleached pale by fluorescent glare, canvas dulled to the color of damp cardboard, while a rake-thin man in a maroon tracksuit stalked its edge, jabbing insults at a boy too young to shave. "Your father's a butcher, kid," the trainer barked, cigarette bouncing at the corner of his mouth, ash snowing over his clipboard. "Hooks like meat cleavers, no brains behind him. You want to be that? Then keep slapping like a schoolgirl." His voice rattled through the gym rafters, iron gray and laced with the South Side's sour anger. Layla's stomach tightened. She knew the script: humiliate, break, rebuild, but watching it play out on someone else's ribs felt different than reading it in notebooks she filled after lights out. Her father had warned her about men like Duke Needle Anderson, trainers who carved diamonds by cutting away everything soft. She hadn't expected to meet him before stepping foot on the mat. Needle spat toward the drain, turned, and caught her staring. "You the courier, or the curiosity?" A taunt disguised as a greeting, the waiting heavy bag twisted slowly behind him like a witness avoiding eye contact. "I'm here for work," she answered, voice low to keep the tremor hidden. The echo betrayed her anyway. 16, knees still bruised from running Riverside Drive stairs, and she was already playing make-believe with men twice her age. He grinned, yellow teeth flaring beneath nicotine fog. "Work? You got fists under those school sleeves." She lifted her bag. Leather creaked, and the Everlast logo, worn but defiant, glinted. Enough to earn a look. Needle hopped off the ring apron with predatory lightness, shoes kissing the floorboards. He smelled of linseed oil and old prize money. "Your old man know you're hustling in sweatboxes." "I know my own feet," she replied, praying the sentence sounded older than she felt. Needle scraped ash from his lip, gaze sharpening. Something in her posture gave him pause. Maybe the way she distributed weight evenly, as Muhammad had drilled into her, between alphabet lessons and morning prayers, or the steadiness in her eyes that refused to blink under fluorescent hum. Whatever he saw, mockery softened into interest. "Gloves," he said, holding out a hand. She offered the bag. He unzipped, fingers brushing the knuckle padding. "These have been broken in by somebody who hits full throttle." "Family heirlooms," she said, meeting his challenge square on. Recognition flickered. He inhaled, slow. "Ali." Not a question, a verdict. The gym's background noise, the skipping rope slaps, the heavy bag thumps, faded beneath the name's gravity. Even the ceiling fan seemed to slow, blades slicing tension instead of air. "I don't train idols." "I'm not asking for worship," she replied. "Just rounds." Needle's laugh cracked the hush. "Rounds. You're a headline before you've thrown a jab in my house." He tossed the gloves back. "I break kids who think surnames win fights." She caught them against her chest. The sting in her forearms reminded her she was not carved from her father's myth, but from her own untested cartilage. "So break me," she murmured, "but do it honest." The trainer's eyes narrowed, searching for flinch. Finding none, he spat again, ritual or resignation, she couldn't tell, and nodded toward a scuffed locker. "Wrap up. You get 3 minutes to show me you're not surname gossip." She moved, unrolling gauze with fingers steady despite the quake inside. Each wrap around wrist and palm tightened her pulse, threading resolve through tendon. When she finished, she stepped into the ring's stale light. The boy who'd been berated slipped out under the bottom rope, relief and pity mingling on his swollen face. Needle climbed in after her, stopwatch dangling like a threat. "First test simple," he said, voice dropping to a private growl. You stay upright till the bell. No counter, no retreat, just weather. A hush swallowed the gym. Even the radio crackling Marvin Gaye in the corner lowered itself, as if Motown too wanted to witness. Layla exhaled, let her guard rise, felt the mats give beneath her soles, and heard her father's distant mantra. Float steady, sting when it matters, slide into her bloodstream. Needle raised a glove, eyes gleaming with cruel intent, and clicked the stopwatch. Time began. Needle's opening hook carved the air like a scythe, but Layla felt only the breeze as she slipped half a shoe's breadth left, shoulders turned just enough to let leather hiss past her cheek. The smack of glove on emptiness drew a whistle from an old cut man at ringside. Needle adjusted instantly, pumping a jab toward her sternum, then another, probing for panic. She let the first graze tape, absorbed the second on her forearm, eyes locked on the trainer's hips instead of his fists, the way Muhammad had taught her, while she balanced on milk crates to reach the heavy bag in their basement. 30 seconds in, sweat already filmed her temples, but her breathing stayed measured. 2 counts in through the nose, 2 out across clenched molars, matching the ticking pulse of Needle's stopwatch. He circled, muttering commentary cruel enough to wilt gentler spirits. Your father floats, but you're stuck in mud, little queen. Show me ankles, not ancestry. Each taunt tried to slip under her guard, deeper than any punch, yet she treated his words like raindrops on a tin roof, acknowledged but powerless to pierce. Needle feinted high, then slashed a right to her ribs. She peeled her elbow down a heartbeat late. Pain flared, hot and bright, but she refused to fold. The trainer smirked, smelling vulnerability, and chased it with triple uppercuts, forcing her into the ropes. Canvas gave beneath her calves, dusty fibers itching through her socks. A younger prospect snickered near the speed bag rack, convinced she would wilt like so many others. Layla inhaled the metallic stink of rope grease, tasted copper where her tongue nicked a molar, and felt time stretch, each second a stone she had to carry uphill. She remembered Louisville mornings when Muhammad insisted she spar shadows at sunrise, footprints wet in dew, while neighbors gawked at the champ's daughter punching ghosts. Stand tall even when you're bending, he'd say, adjusting her stance with those famous knuckles softened by fatherhood. Now, bent did not mean broken. She rolled along the strands, let Needle's glove skim hair, then pivoted off the corner, reclaiming center ring. 1 minute left. Needle's sleeves darkened with sweat. Frustration twitched across his thin lips. He widened his stance, loading power, planning a statement right cross meant to end the audition early. Layla saw weight sink into his rear heel, saw the subtle drop of his opposite shoulder, and recognized commitment. She steeled her spine, knees coiled, then at the last possible instant, dipped under the cross, sliding to his blind side. Needle over-rotated, balance compromised, and Layla's instinct screamed to counter, left hook to liver, right overhand to temple, the combination Muhammad called rent and receipt. But the rule was clear. No counter, only weather. She strangled the surge, content to watch Needle wrestle gravity. The trainer caught himself on a glove, straightened, face flushed with equal parts effort and embarrassment. "Clock's cheating for you," he snarled, eyes flicking toward the stopwatch. 10 seconds. He charged, unleashing a barrage, hooks whipping past her guard like angry birds. She retreated just enough, shoulders rolling, absorbing shock through core and thighs until the bell's clang split the gym's heavy air. Silence followed, thick as varnish. Needle's chest heaved. Layla's rose more quietly, though every muscle trembled with the aftershock. She lowered her gloves, fingertips tingling from adrenaline backlash. Crossed the ropes the veteran cutman, old Sam Solomon, who'd iced Foreman's brow before Zaire, let out a slow whistle and began clapping, calloused palms echoing like a subdued drum roll. Others joined, the bag boy, the jump rope kids, even the boy Needle had humiliated earlier. Needle flicked sweat from his brow, trying to summon scorn, but the corners of his mouth betrayed reluctant respect. "Luck survives 3 minutes," he said, voice hoarse. "Skill survives 9 more." He tossed her a fresh mouthpiece. "You earn your next lesson against a man who fought your daddy twice and never forgot the receipt." The ropes parted to admit Jerry Quarry, older now, scar tissue webbing his cheekbones, but shoulders still broad as laundry poles. He stepped onto the canvas with the measured caution of someone who'd spent years translating pain into paycheck. Quarry looked Layla up and down, cracked a half smile. "Alley blood," he murmured, tapping his own ribs. "Let's see if the sting runs in the family." Needle reset the stopwatch. Lila flexed aching fingers inside the gloves, pulse drumming against tape. Across the ring, Quarry touched glove to heart in a gesture of respect, then slid into stance less as opponent than examiner. Outside the ropes, gym doors creaked. A tall silhouette, broad shoulders, unmistakable gait, paused in the threshold, unseen by most, but felt by Layla as surely as gravity. Her father had arrived, word traveling faster than telephone lines. Needle's voice cut through her awareness. "Round begins on my count." Quarry's eyes softened, sensing the new presence, yet his guard remained iron. Layla swallowed hard. The true test was no longer endurance alone. It was delivering poise while the greatest judge alive watched from the shadows. "Time!" Needle barked, thumb slicing the air. Quarry advanced with veteran patience, and Lila stepped in to meet him, every nerve alight, aware that one misstep could shatter more than pride. She exhaled, let the roar of her heartbeat fade into the hum of fluorescent bulbs, and trusted the rhythm Muhammad had drilled into her bones. Float steady, sting when it matters. Quarry's first jab came fast, nothing like Needle's probing taps. It was a blunt carpenter's hammer, aimed to test bone, not will. Layla blocked with a raised elbow, felt the jolt rattle clear to her shoulder blade, and realized why older reporters still whispered about the man's heavy hands. He followed with a chopping right that arced over her guard and grazed scalp, buzzing her ears for a heartbeat. She kept her feet planted, refusing the instinct to flee, half slipping the next hook so the leather brushed braid instead of jaw. The crowd, small but thick with experts, shifted closer, recognizing the difference between a gym duet and the first bars of an unscripted symphony. Quarry did not speak. His eyes asked the questions. He doubled his jab, forcing her to parry, then stepped inside at an angle, turning shoulders to smother any return. Years earlier, he'd used the same geometry to burrow under Muhammad's reach, carving body shots that echoed through Zaire's humid night. Now the target was smaller, quicker, but he adjusted with grim craftsmanship, measuring distance the way a mason checks plumb. Layla answered with her own arithmetic, heels light, knees greased, torso giving ground only when necessary, never volunteering straight retreat. Twice she beat him to a spot, scoring flicking counters that snapped his head just enough to cancel momentum. Sweat sprayed from his closely cropped hair, sparkling in the overhead fluorescence like filings struck from steel. Needle prowled ringside, stopwatch forgotten, eyes greedy for evidence. Would praise break the lineage's spell, or would failure finally crack the daughter's composure? He barked a single word, "Dig!" Quarry obliged, dropping a left hook into Layla's ribs with a thud that stole half her breath. Pain radiated under her guard, a hot ripple rolling around spine and up through throat. Vision pinwheeled. For half a second, ropes seemed to crawl sideways. In that swirl, she heard her father's baritone, gentler than the gym's machismo, yet unyielding. "Pain tells the truth about you, Butterfly. Listen, then answer." She clenched teeth, rode the hurt, pivoted clockwise to free her liver from further assault. Quarry tracked, but misjudged by an inch. Her counter-right cross cracked against the ridge above his left eye with surprising weight. His expression flickered, not agony, not anger, simply acknowledgement. Respect, earned one stitch at a time. The gallery gasped. Needle's eyebrows jumped before he repinned his features into a sneer. 30 seconds bled away in a tense staccato of foot shuffles and glove snaps. Then Quarry changed cadence, dipping low, shoulders rolling like pistons as he unleashed a miniature storm of short hooks to hip and flank. Layla's guard absorbed some, hip flexors numbed by the rest. She tethered mind to breath, 4-count inhale, 4-count drive, and waited for the rhythm to expose a seam. It arrived on the 6th punch. The veteran's elbow flared a shade wide, telegraphing a body shot he'd thrown 1,000 times. She threaded a straight left between his gloves, punching across his chest to freeze him, then sprung a right uppercut that lifted his chin with surgical precision. Crowd noise spiked. A bucket clanged somewhere as a startled trainee dropped water. Quarry staggered half-step, gloves instinctively high. Blood beaded where her earlier cross had kissed eyebrow, red channel tracing sweat down his cheek. He grinned, a raw warrior's grin, and nodded. The signal rode across the ring to Muhammad, who remained in shadow near the doorway, arms folded. His lips curved, silent approval that filled Layla's lungs more than any gulp of air. Pride, second-hand but nourishing. Needle slapped canvas with an open palm. Enough dancing. The command cracked like a whip. Quarry pressed forward again, less patient now, hooking off the jab, heavy shoulders turning like cranks. Layla's elbows tucked, shielding ribs already bruised, yet she refused to freeze. She gave him angles, half steps left, sudden drops of level, then short bursts inside to clinch and spin free. Each escape bled seconds from the round, each clinch smuggled oxygen into starving muscles. The bell, old Sam's tarnished bicycle bell, rang out at last. Layla exhaled, arms shaking beneath glove weight. Quarry rested forearms on her shoulders companionably for a moment before they separated. He tapped her glove. "Chip off the whole block," he muttered, breath warm with menthol gum. She smiled through the ache. Needle strode between them, wiping blood from Quarry's brow with a thumb, inspecting Layla's swelling ribline, searching for cracks he could pry wider. "Round 2 and 60, he announced. "If you've got another miracle, say your prayers now." Layla walked to her stool, an upturned milk crate draped with towel, and sat, shoulders heaving. Sam slid an ice pack along her side, hissed sympathy. Outside the ropes, Muhammad finally stepped into fluorescent glow, his presence magnetizing every eye. He said nothing, merely lifted his right fist, thumb up, then closed fingers over it like a secret kept. The gesture sang louder than speeches. Across the ring, Needle whispered to Quarry, urgency etched in every line of his hawkish face. Whatever plan they forged, it would aim not at Layla's body, but her lineage, a test of spirit disguised as violence. She dabbed tongue to split lip, tasted iron, felt fear nip heels. Then she pictured Dawn shadow boxing on dew-slick grass, father counting footbeats. Terror shrank beneath that memory. Needle's hand shot skyward. Seconds out. Ice pack vanished. Mouthpiece slid between teeth. Layla rose before the count, weight centered. Quarry rolled shoulders, blood clotting at brow. The gym held its breath. A lesson older than either fighter hung in the heat. Legacy is forged where pain and composure meet. And the stopwatch clicked alive once more. Quarry's gloves met Layla's again at center ring, the second round only seconds old, and already Needle's voice sliced through the stagnant air. "Break the mirror. Show her she's no reflection." It was a barb aimed at ego, but its point struck something deeper, the fear of being nothing more than her father's silhouette. Quarry obliged, pitching a looping right that threatened to uncork that doubt. Layla ducked under, hair whipping, but before she could reset, he buried a left into her solar plexus. White heat flared through her diaphragm, legs quivered. She clinched, forehead pressed against the veteran's damp collarbone, drawing in staccato breaths that tasted of resin and rust. Referee Sam pried them apart with arthritic hands, muttering to himself about kids and gods. Quarry marched forward, gloves high, elbows stapled. He bullied her toward the ropes where Muhammad once spent nights inventing rope-a-dope. Now his daughter risked becoming its unwilling exhibit. Layla sidestepped, but Quarry mirrored, hemming her with thudding body shots that thumped like distant artillery. Each blow stacked pressure along her ribcage, reigniting the bruise he'd painted moments earlier. Needle shouted counts. 40 seconds in, she's fading already. Weaponizing time as a crowbar. From the corner, Muhammad watched, face unreadable, but his fists began a subtle drumbeat against his own thighs, as if urging invisible footwork. Layla caught the motion, let it sink with her heart. When Quarry cocked another hook, she dipped inside the arc, slipped her left shoulder past his sternum, and shoved off. The sudden angle pulled a gasp from observers. Space, that precious currency, opened, and she spent it on a triple jab that stung Quarry's wounded brow, reopening the slice. Blood sailed in crimson commas. Quarry pawed at his eye, a gesture that bought her 2 more beats. She cashed the first on a right cross, the second on a left hook to the body, returning the debt he'd lent her earlier. Crowd noise swelled, the gym's cracked windows buzzing like hive glass. An old columnist, Red Smith, scratched frantic notes, pen jittering as if to keep pace with the momentum shift. Needle felt it too, and pounded the apron. "Quit playing gent and cut the ring." Quarry nodded, nose flaring, and lunged with renewed spite. He switched targets, a chopping right to temple, then immediate clinch, his forearm grinding across the back of Layla's neck, forcing her downward. Sam's warning was late. The damage was done. Neck muscles pinched, balance scrambled. Quarry shoved free and pitched an uppercut meant to detach memory from bone. Instinct bent Layla at the waist, leather scraped scalp, but missed chin. She countered reflexively. Short, right uppercut, left hook, pivot. Combinations her father drilled until they haunted sleep. The sequence landed flush enough to stop Quarry in mid-stride. A ripple of disbelief coursed across his features, somewhere between admiration and alarm. He blinked away sweat and blood. Layla, breathing through a slit mouthpiece, pressed but controlled haste. She'd seen veterans lure youth into reckless flurries, only to punish them with timing. Needle, desperate, changed tactics. "Talk to her, Jerry. Tell her what happens to glass when it meets a hammer." Quarry actually spoke, a gravel-thick murmur. "Your old man can't save you in here." The words floated between them, heavier than gloves. For a heartbeat they hung, challengers in their own right. Layla felt fury twitch, threatening to override discipline. She steadied it, recalling Angelo Dundee's maxim Muhammad quoted at breakfast. "Make him run out of breath before you run out of poise." So she smiled, a quiet, almost pitying curve, and replied, "Then swing harder. I'm still waiting to break." She punctuated the taunt with a jab feint, rolled under his retaliatory right, and rifled a counter straight to the cut. Blood geysered. Quarry's knees dipped. Gasps overtook the humid air. Needle slapped the canvas, frantic, but the veteran's equilibrium wavered on its own axis. Layla didn't swarm. She stepped left, right, forcing Quarry to adjust, making fatigue chase him like a dog through traffic. The bell's clang was mercy. Quarry sagged onto his stool, physician Chick Moore already pressing gauze to the gash. Needle barked instructions laced with invectives, yet panic leaked through syllables like water through rotten wood. Across the ring, Muhammad squatted beside Layla, no stool required, and whispered so only she could hear. "Don't just beat him, daughter. Teach him. Every dodge a lesson, every punch a sermon." He touched glove to her forehead, leaving a smudge of his own sweat, a baptism of lineage and expectation. Round 3 loomed, but within the gym's charged silence, something fundamental had pivoted. The crowd no longer wondered if the champ's daughter belonged here. They wondered whether Quarry would survive her education. And as the seconds ticked, Layla's pulse settled into a drum that matched the cadence of distant applause already forming in imaginations of every witness, the rhythm of legacy forging itself in real time. The 60-second intermission evaporated, and the clapper signaled the seconds to scatter. Quarry rose slowly, the cut sealed under a lacquer of coagulant and adrenaline, but his breathing betrayed the effort. Fast, ragged, like a man who had outrun a storm only to find it waiting in his lungs. Lila stood before her stool until the count reached 8, toes lifting, settling, the dance already whispering through her muscles. Muhammad, satisfied, slid the stool away himself, a ritual that told every eye in the building. She doesn't need a throne, only ground to claim. The referee's gesture unlocked them, and Quarry stamped forward behind a high guard, determined to reclaim territory. Needle's voice ricocheted from a concrete pillar. "Bad intentions, Jerry. She tasted your leather. Now make her choke on it." Quarry snapped a jab, another, then stepped across his own line and hurled a right meant to split orbitals. Lila parried the jab with a deft roll of the wrist, but the cross still grazed her cheek, sowing a bright flare of pain along the bone. She answered with a laid hook, short, economical, landing flush on the veteran's liver. Quarry's face tightened, a shudder click of agony he tried to disguise by clinching. He wrapped an arm around her shoulder, hissed into her ear, "Your daddy danced, but I'll dig you a grave." The taunt was stale, desperate, and it wilted the moment it met her calm. She shoved off, palms on his chest, forcing separation. Outside the ropes, Bundini Brown, visiting from Deer Lake, broke into ecstatic cadence. "Float the mind, baby girl. Sink the fists. Rhythm before wrath." The shout restored the beat in her blood. She circled right, chopping at Quarry's damaged eye, with a jab that now snapped like a whip, its crack audible over squealing turnbuckles. Each connection left a tiny crimson starburst on his cheek. Staccato art, painting fatigue across skin. Needle abandoned strategy for volume. "Headhunt, Jerry. Make her regret the mirror." Quarry obeyed, headhunting with broad hooks that carved humid arcs through the fluorescent haze. Layla slipped under the first, pivoted outside the second, then drilled a counter right down the barrel. Leather kissed bone. Quarry's knees buckled, but gravity found mercy, letting him stagger sideways instead of down. Somewhere a veteran cutman whispered a prayer for tape, strong enough to keep his fighter standing. Layla stalked, but not recklessly. Distant memories of Friday film sessions with Angelo Dundee hummed caution. Hurt is not the same as finished. Punish the mistake. Don't become the next one. She prodded him with jabs, measuring the wobble in his ankles. Quarry tried to mask it behind bravado, pounding gloves together, inviting her. Blood trickled past the coagulant, down the ridge of his nose, and onto the white Everlast stitched across his trunks, each drop a small resignation letter. Mid-ring now, Layla feinted across, drew Quarry's guard tight, then fired a right uppercut that split his gloves and snapped his head back as though a string had yanked his chin skyward. The crowd inhaled as one. Quarry's eyes lost focus, searching the rafters for something that might steady the room. Layla pivoted again, a half-step left, then a left hook to temple delivered with surgical torque. Quarry folded inward, torso twisting, knees bending to half-mast. He caught himself on a glove, but the canvas beneath him thundered protest. Sam darted in, began a count he suspected would conclude this seminar. 1, 2... Quarry's gaze swam until it snagged on Needle's pounding fist, on Bundini's grinning disbelief, on Muhammad's stoic silhouette. Pride, stubborn, wounded, forced current back into his muscles. At 7, he straightened, wobble hidden behind a murderer's grin. The referee's skeptical stare lingered a breath before granting continuation. Layla listened to her own pulse, calm despite the roar. She saw the veteran's will burning on dwindling fuel, recognized the moment for what it was. Not a chance to finish, but a chance to transform. She advanced, gloves high, feinted low, then ripped a body shot whose echo rattled the light fixtures overhead. Quarry's mouth fell open, air leaving in a croak. She landed a second hook, this one tempered. Enough to command, not enough to cripple. He clinched, sagging into her shoulder, the smell of sweat and iron thick between them. Voice a ragged whisper, he muttered, "You're no shadow." She answered so softly only he could hear. Then stopped chasing ghosts. The bell rescued what remained of him. As he shuffled to his corner, Layla stayed center. Ring a moment longer, forcing every camera, every journalist, every aspiring fighter in the balcony to engrave the image. Quarry battered but upright, Ali blood-flecked yet serene, history remixing itself. When she finally turned, Muhammad extended his fist. She bumped it, and his eyes, bright with unshed pride, told her the silent verdict. The lesson was landing. Needle and the cut man worked feverishly, ice and pressure and panic converging on Quarry's swollen visage. Across the ring, Bundini sang under his breath, a blues riff about dynasty and dawn. Layla spat red into a bucket, rolled her shoulders, and let her mind slip briefly to the girls back in Southside Chicago who would read about this tomorrow, maybe tape pictures of her over old posters of her father. The thought warmed her better than adrenaline. 10 seconds to the bell. Muhammad's only instruction. Break him kind. Show the world power without cruelty. She nodded, and somewhere in the gym a reporter realized he'd been holding his breath for an entire round, the notes on his pad blurred by sweat dripping from his forehead. Round 4 waited like a door halfway open, light spilling through, and Layla Ali stepped toward it with the poise of someone who knew exactly what waited on the other side, and welcomed it. Quarry lurched from the stool, a man convinced that momentum could be faked if he just moved quickly enough. Needle swatted his back. "You quit on her! You quit on the whole damn decade!" And the words flared behind Quarry's eyes, merging with the bright ache beneath his brow. Lila inhaled once, crisp and deep, letting the smell of resin and bleach carry her back to childhood mornings in Deer Lake, when she'd chase her father's shadow through uncut frost. She remembered the way her lungs had burned then, the way he had laughed, telling her, "Pain's a map, learn its roads, and you'll never be lost inside it." The bell now served as compass and ignition. She flowed toward center ring, footfall soundless, gloves humming an expectant drone. Quarry threw a jab that was more announcement than threat. The shoulder rise telegraphed, the hip rotation a half-second late. Layla slapped it aside, stepped in, and buried a right into the meat of his bicep, targeting endurance, not ego. The thud made Needle wince. Quarry answered with a looping left hook, raw and heavy. She bent at the knees and felt the glove comb her hair, the narrow escape sharpening her focus into a pinpoint. She countered with a midline uppercut, the punch ascending like a secret whispered from ribs to chin. It landed beneath Quarry's sternum, folding him for a blink long enough to permit a short left to the jaw. He spun away in survival's reflex, bumping ropes that squealed under sudden strain. Outside the ropes, Bundini pounded the apron, chanting a rhythm older than the scoreboard. "Drip the honey, baby. Fire the bees." Reporters looked at one another, pens hovering midair, unsure which spell to transcribe first, the words or the movement they seemed to conjure. Ali Sr. watched silent, a monument in tracksuit and towel, But when Layla's gaze flicked to him, she saw approval flicker like sunrise on lake water, quick and dazzling. Quarry rallied behind a burst to the body, 3 blows that hammered leather against her forearms. The third leaked through, kissing her ribs, and she felt its promise bruise. Heat flushed her side, yet irritation cooled it immediately. She answered by doubling her own jab, top then bottom, and finished with a slicing right cross that shaved skin off the cheek already swollen. Blood bright as cardinal feathers spattered the white trim of his trunks. Needle shouted at the cut man to ready gauze, but the plea dissolved under crowd noise rising like a furnace draft. Half the round gone, and discipline kept her from drowning in the roar. She fainted low. Quarry bit, dropping his elbows, and she speared a hook across the temple. His knees liquefied. Glove to canvas again, though he refused the mat. The referee's count grew roots in the hush. 1, 2. Quarry's lips moved, repeating something private. Maybe his children's names, maybe the month's overdue mortgage. At 6, he stood, but in the posture of a bridge about to collapse from its own weight. The official leaned close, eyes asking a question Quarry could only answer by lifting gloves. He did, trembling. Layla exhaled slowly, feeling compassion tug against ambition. Needle sensed the softening and barked across the kingdom of sweat and echoes. Finish or forgive. Just decide. The words stung enough to crystallize her intention. She stepped forward behind a textbook 1-2, not murderous, but undeniable. The first punch split Quarry's guard. The second spun his head like a weather vane. He clinched reflexively, draping arms around her shoulders. His breath gusted over her ear, smelling of copper and defeat. Keep your throne, he rasped. I'm done chasing ghosts. She tightened her arms just enough to keep him upright until the ref pried them apart. The towel sailed from Needle's corner, white and fluttering, surrender etched into its folds. But Quarry's legs had already gone glassy. He sagged to his knees before the cloth brushed canvas. The ref waved it off, and the gym erupted. Some cheers, some stunned silence, every pair of eyes recalibrating history in real time. Layla retreated to her corner, heart drumming not from exertion, but from the weight of what mercy and destruction feel like when they occupy the same glove. Mohammed climbed the apron, eyes misted behind the grin. You broke him kind, he said, voice thick. She answered with a nod, the words snagged behind a swell of emotion. Quarry, chest heaving, managed a tired salute toward her before medics guided him to the stool. Needle crouched beside his fighter, anger drained into reluctant respect, whispering, She ain't her father's echo, Jerry. She's his aftershock. Reporters scribbled furiously, but none could capture the subtlety of stillness now hanging heavy. A veteran humbled yet whole, a daughter stepping out from legendary shade, a gym full of witnesses, realizing they would speak of this sparring session the rest of their lives. As ring lights cooled, Layla allowed herself one glance at the scuffed canvas, the droplet constellations of sweat and blood glinting under sodium glare. Each mark was a coordinate on the map her father had promised, a geography of pain she now navigated with sovereign grace. She traced a toe through one ruby smear, then stepped over the ropes into a future widening before her like an unbeaten road, every stride echoing with the silent thunder of possibility. Sun rose in a lazy amber smear over Pennsylvania's Blue Mountains, yet the Deer Lake camp vibrated like an anthill kicked awake. A hum of skipping rope whir, bag thumps, coffee slurps, typewriter clacks. Word of yesterday's spar had outraced dawn. Howard Cosel's crew had parked its bulky ABC van beside the log cabins at 3 a.m. By 6, he was already rehearsing adjectives, hairpiece tilted against the breeze, determined to be first to explain how Jerry Quarry, a ranked heavyweight, had been dissected by a girl 7 stones lighter. Inside the mess hall, Layla could feel cameras breathing on her skin before she tasted oatmeal. She slid onto a bench beside Bundini, who was buttering toast with the solemnity of a priest. "They think they saw the show," he muttered, eyes glinting. "But the show ain't a trick. It's you turning truth into daylight. Truth blinds folks if they stare too hard." Across the room, needle-jawed with Angelo Dundee, volume low, but hands carving the air. Dundee kept repeating, "Slow the climb, Pete. Let the public chase her, not the other way." Needle shook his head, throat cords tight. "She's already on the ridge, Angie. You want her to climb down so newspapers can catch up." The argument died when Allie walked in, towel draped like a sash, sweat from early roadwork still stippling his jaw. Conversation receded the way tide pulls from shore. Even Cosell's booming baritone pinched to a whisper. Allie surveyed the room, eyes landing on his daughter. No grin this time. Just a measured gaze, proud yet wary, as though yesterday's canvas still floated between them. He sat opposite her, palms cupping steam from a tin mug. "Reporters are vultures," he began, voice soft enough that only Bundini and the walls heard. "Feed 'em too quick, they forget to fly. You ready for that weight?" Layla held the stare, felt its familiar gravity, and nodded. "Weights build muscle," she said, throat dry but steady. Allie studied her another beat, then tapped 2 fingers against the table. A private signal that the subject was tabled but not dismissed. Cosell sensed an opening and swooped, microphone already humming. "Champ, what does yesterday's exhibition tell us about the future of heavyweight pugilism, and dare I say, the future of women in the game?" Allie leaned back, smile returning like a switch turned halfway. "Howard, my baby girl just rewrote a page. Whether the book prints that page or rips it out, that's on fellas like you." Layla caught Cosell's quick inhale. She added, "Mr. Cosell, pages don't burn easy when they're written in sweat." Then rose before more questions could root. Outside, cold mountain air slapped her awake. Needle followed, clipboard underarm, jaw grinding tobacco he never smoked. "Yesterday gave you noise," he said, pacing. "Noise ain't pressure. Real pressure arrives in envelopes." He handed her a telegram stamped Top Rank Boxing, New York. Madison Square Garden offers 6-round exhibition versus Oscar Bonavena as co-main for Ali Frazier contract signing. Purse $5,000, confirmed by Friday. Layla's stomach fluttered, even as her hands remained still. Bonavena was granite-jawed, unpredictable, and known for dismissing women publicly. Needle watched her reading her instead. "Say yes and you enter their ledger. Say no and you stay a rumor." She folded the telegram once, twice, until the paper felt like a pebble in her fist. "I'll answer after road work." The trail behind camp wound through birch and shale. She ran it alone, boots crunching frost, each exhale a cloud chasing another. Memories surfaced unbidden, being 8 and racing this same incline, while Ali shadowboxed ahead, never looking back yet somehow matching her pace, the perfect paternal metronome. Now she set the tempo, and behind her she imagined the world's doubt, heavy footsteps in pursuit. Halfway up the ridge she stopped, pulse banging, and faced the valley. In miniature below she saw Cosell's van, Quarry's dented sedan, lines of reporters like ants hauling their fragments of yesterday. She let the sight anchor her breathing, then whispered the words her father once fed the mountain air. "I am bigger than what they measure." The echo fled into trees, returning softer but intact. When she jogged downhill, Ali stood by the bag shed, gloves dangling over his shoulder, expression unreadable. "Telegram?" he asked. She dropped the folded pebble into his palm. He glanced at the words, then at her. "Oscar hits like Argentina owes him money," he said, half-smile curving. "He'll swing wild, call you names in 2 languages." Layla wiped sweat with her sleeve. "Words bruise less than knees," she answered. Ali laughed, short and bright. "Then tell him yes. But remember, Garden lights hotter than this sun. Heat shows cracks. She met his gaze, feeling the corridor of years between their peaks shorten to a single shared breath. "Then we fix the cracks before Friday," she said. That afternoon, gym doors shut, press barred. Needle choreographed a gauntlet, heavy bag rounds with lead-filled gloves, sparring southpaws who mimicked Bonavina's bull rush, medicine ball drills that hammered her midsection until nausea simmered at the back of her throat. Ali observed, silent general of a campaign fought on muscle fiber and will. Each time her guard dipped, he snapped fingers. No words. Each snap lashed sharper than any insult. After 8 rounds, she staggered, legs buzzing. Needle loomed, voice a rasp of gravel. "Name a reason to quit, and I'll let you." She thought of Cosell's headline drafts, of Bonavina's sneer, of little girls in Cairo, Detroit, Manila who would never be invited into a ring unless she kicked the door first. "No reasons," she said. Needle nodded, satisfied cruelty glinting like a whetted knife. "Good." Round 9. Night fell in soundless velvet. Layla lay on her bunk, ribs pulsing, telegram confirmed and wired back. Outside, crickets stitched darkness with song. Inside, Ali hummed a lullaby older than his titles, sitting in the doorway, large frame blocking corridor light. She closed her eyes, but one thought flared bright against the dark. Madison Square Garden was 8 days away, and history had started counting down in heartbeats, not hours. She inhaled, letting the pressure settle on her chest, a mantle cooling into armor. Somewhere, Oscar Bonavina might have felt a faint ripple, the way sailors sense a storm still below the horizon. 2 nights before the Garden card, a bruised gray sky dragged cold rain over Manhattan, but the city still flashed like a pinball table. The entourage arrived in 2 station wagons Angelo had rented from LaGuardia. Ali, Layla, Needle, Bundini, and a trunk filled with gear that smelled of camphor and battle. The cabbie who helped unload stared at Layla's swollen knuckles, then up at her face, trying to stitch the 2 images together. She offered a polite nod. The man muttered something about crazy year for boxing, shook his head, and disappeared into traffic. Inside the old Americana Hotel, a miniature press corps waited in ambush beside the elevators. Reporters jostled, microphones jabbed forward like bayonets. "Miss Ali, Bonavina says you're a novelty act. Any comment? Is this exhibition just a feminist stunt? Champ, would you fight a woman next?" Ali raised one gloved hand, a conductor requesting silence. "Gentlemen, my daughter ain't no novelty. And if Oscar thinks so, he'll learn quicker than spelling his own name." Then he winked, disarming the room with that nuclear grin, but Layla noticed the protective edge behind it, as if her father's confidence were a drawbridge he could raise the moment water darkened. Needle hustled her past the cameras to a converted conference room, where Angelo had hung a makeshift speed bag. "Travel sweat out," the trainer said, tossing her wraps. The bag sang a high-pitched rhythm that echoed down the corridor. With each pop, she pictured Bonavina's face, his taunts printed in the daily news. "Women belong in kitchens, not rings." Heat rose in her shoulders, tempo quickened, until Ali stepped beside her and caught the bag mid-swing. "Don't let their words program your pulse," he murmured. "Anger drains the tank before the bell rings." She exhaled, steadying breath, then resumed, slower, cleaner, a Morse code spelling patience. Evening merged into a mandatory rules meeting with the Garden's matchmaker, Teddy Brenner, cigar ash dangling like snow on his lapel. "This stays an exhibition," Brenner reminded, eyes flicking from Ali to Bonavina's manager. 6 2-minute rounds, 16-ounce gloves, no official winner announced. Bonavina, bull-necked in a leather jacket, snorted loud enough for every microphone. "Winner will be obvious," he said in Spanish-thickened English. His gaze crawled over Layla, dismissive, almost bored. She held it until he looked away first. A tiny victory no camera noticed, yet she filed it like ammunition. Back in the hotel room, Needle produced a reel-to-reel recorder and played previous Bonavina fights at low volume. Grunts, crowd roars, the smack of gloves on flesh. "Watch the left hook," he pointed, pencil tapping air just ahead of the Argentinian's looping punch. His weight loads on the back foot. You slip inside, dig ribs, pivot out. Layla nodded, tracing the rhythm with her shoulders. Outside, honking taxis and rain combined into a restless lullaby. She tried to sleep, but Bonavina's hook kept repeating on the inside of her eyelids like a strobe. Next morning she ran Central Park at 5, breath ghosting in winter air, footsteps joined by Ali's lighter stride. Neither spoke until they reached Bethesda Terrace. Snowflakes had begun to drift, turning the fountain angel into a silhouette. Ali stopped, hands on hips. "Garden crowd different from Philly smokers," he said. "They love you loud, but they love you falling louder. Give 'em something they didn't know they wanted." He knelt, drew a crude ring in the snow with one finger. "Stay here," he marked the center. "Make him move, and the canvas shrinks to a place only you can breathe." She studied the white diagram until wind erased it, commitment imprinting deeper than chalk. Weigh-in that afternoon became a theater of exaggeration. Flashbulbs sparked. Bonavina flexed, kissed his biceps, tossed a plastic doll into the air to laughter. Layla stepped onto the scale, face unreadable, and the crowd quieted as the needle settled. She was 14 pounds lighter, 4 inches shorter, yet the hush hinted some observers suddenly believed the math could lie. As she slipped back into her robe, Bonavina leaned close enough for her to smell stale cigars. "After I'm done," he murmured. "You sign my apron, chica?" She smiled, not sweetly, and replied in Spanish she had learned for moments like this. "After I'm done, you'll sign my glove. With your blood or your tears, Oscar, you choose." Reporters gasped. Bonavina's nostrils flared, a bull catching scent of its own mortality. Night before the fight, Needle enforced silence. No television, no visitors, just an 8-minute shadowboxing sequence, and a prayer with Ali that melted years off his voice. "Lord," he whispered, "guide her hands as you once steadied mine." When he rose, eyes moist, Layla felt the mantle pass, intangible, yet heavy as championship gold. She lay on the hotel bed, gloves beside her like loyal dogs, and for the first time did not replay Bonavina's hook. Instead, she visualized a slow, perfect pivot, her right hand striking truth into the ribs of history, while Madison Square Garden watched, their collective breath waiting to exhale. Dawn over 8th Avenue looked metallic, cold enough to sting Layla's lungs when she stepped from the hotel. A thin sheet of ice glazed the sidewalk. She planted each foot the way her father had shown. Ball, then heel, because a slip this morning would echo forever. The garden's service entrance loomed ahead like a ship's hatch, crew already hauling in crates of programs, orange Gatorade jugs, buckets of rosin that smelled faintly of a high school woodshop. Angelo met her at the door, chewing peppermint, eyes sharpening as if turning the key on some invisible engine. "Remember what pain feels like," he said, slipping gauze around her wrists. "Then remember you survived worse." He pulled each wrap snug until circulation tingled. Inside the concrete bowels of the arena, she heard the Union Band rehearsing "The Star-Spangled Banner," trumpets ricocheting down corridors dotted with flecks of earlier wars, cracked plaster, smeared shoe polish, initials carved by forgotten journeymen. Bundini taped a handwritten sign to her locker. "Float, sting, finish." Layla grinned. Even the letter F looked like it was dancing. Ali entered last, draped in an ebony overcoat, silence following him like royalty. He opened a small velvet pouch and set its contents, his 1960 Olympic gold, on the bench. "I wore this so Rome would never leave me," he said softly. You wear memory in muscle. Tonight, the world sees it move. He closed the pouch again, leaving the medal where it lay, a borrowed planet between them. When the ring announcer's voice bellowed through the ducts, Needle ordered gloves on. 16 ounces felt momentarily foreign, like borrowed hands, but a few touches to her forehead synced body and leather. They started the walk. Narrow tunnel, caged light bulbs, scent of popcorn meeting cigar smoke. The garden crowd roared her surname in 2 beats. A-Lee, A-Lie. Yet the texture was different from her father's nights, rougher, questioning, as though 10,000 people leaned forward, asking, can she possibly belong? She saw Archie Moore among the commentators, Howard Cosell adjusting his toupee, even Brooks Robinson in a suit that glowed under the arc lamps. Baseball royalty come to witness either evolution or spectacle. Bonavina was already inside the ropes, bouncing like a tetherball. His corner had sewn Argentina's flag on his robe, but he had slipped a frilly white apron over it, a final jab. She noticed a red welt on his left cheek where the barber's razor had kissed too close. Imperfection signaled through pores. Referee Arthur Mercante called them center ring. Exhibition only. Protect yourselves. Break clean, he recited, though his eyes lingered on Layla as if double-checking her resolve. Bonavina leaned in, voice sliding beneath the referee's cadence. Hope you brought a frying pan, darling. She answered by lifting her gloves an inch higher. The gesture made the crowd murmur, a current running the cheap seats. Bell rang. First round. No feeling out, just thunder disguised as dance. She jabbed his brow. Pop, pop, each impact a knuckle knocking on prejudice. Bonavina's counterhook whooshed past her chin, wind smelling of tobacco and spite. Needle's voice knifed through the din. Circle, girl, circle. She obeyed, sliding left, shoulders loose, ring lights strobing across sweat, already forming a necklace at her collar. Bonavina charged, attempting to bully her to the ropes. She dipped under, drove her right into the shelf of his ribs, felt cartilage flex. Crowd gasped like one organism discovering breath. Second round, he tried talking, Spanish curse words syruped in machismo, but the leather answered for her. She feinted high, stabbed low, pivoted out before his glove brushed cotton threads of her trunks. Ali at ringside shouted cadences only she understood, half encouragement, half drumbeat of heritage. Paint the fence, baby, paint it pretty. She brushed a triple jab across Bonavina's nose. Tiny crimson beads appeared, ruby punctuation. Third round, pace sharpened, Bonavina's frustration visible in the hitch of his shoulders. He trapped her momentarily in a neutral corner, through a looping right that clipped her ear guard. The shock rippled down her spine, a steel guitar chord. For half a heartbeat, flashes of doubt flickered. Press headlines, apron jokes, the yawning chasm between ambition and reality. Then Ali's earlier words echoed. Canvas shrinks to a place only you can breathe. She exhaled, rolled under his follow-up, and found the pocket inside his guard. Right hand exploded to his midsection. Left hook climbed the staircase of his ribs into his jaw. Bonavina's knees stuttered, torso listing like a ferry caught by sudden wake. The garden stood, seats slamming as people rose. Time stretched elastic. Layla saw everything. Angelo's white towel clutched but unseen, Cosell's mouth forming an astonished "oh," her father's fists pulsing against the apron. Bonavina wobbled yet refused to fall, pride stapling him upright. 10 seconds left in the round, she pressed advantage, combinations flowing like script. Jab, hook, liver, step out. Bell cracked. She froze mid-punch, glove hovering an inch from his temple. He sagged into his corner, eyes glassy with equal parts pain and awakening. She walked back to her stool, heartbeat drumming but breath surprisingly smooth. Needle wiped her brow, whispered, "You just changed the temperature of history. Keep it boiling." Across the ring, Bonavina's trainer fanned him with a towel, urgent Spanish flooding the air. Blood trickled from his nostril, a single line cutting through bravado. When the 1-minute whistle blew, mercy and menace seemed to share the same oxygen. Lila tapped her gloves together, rose before the bell, and in that suspended instant between rounds understood something primal. The garden no longer wondered if she belonged. It waited to see how bright a new universe could burn. Bonavena answered the 4th round, wearing a stare as vacant as a neon sign at dawn. But the will beneath it was granite. He charged like a man determined to crash straight through his own exhaustion. Lila met him mid-ring, whipping a jab that skimmed along his brow. Yet she felt the shift, a last surge from an old bull, aware this arena might become his pasture of regret. He bulled her to the ropes, forearm grinding, whispered into her ear, "They only cheer until you bleed." For a beat the words tasted metallic, memory of playground taunts she had buried under miles of roadwork, but they detonated resolve instead of fear. She ducked, wrapped his elbow, spun free, and the crowd's roar flattened into a hum of pure voltage. Angelo's bark stabbed through the tumult. "Paint angles!" "Don't trade." She sliced diagonally, feet gliding across the monogram, and ripped a right uppercut that curled up from her shoelaces. Bonavina's mouthpiece half jumped from his lips. Spit beads arced under the Klieg lights like shattered pearls. He staggered sideways. She pivoted again, hips winding, sent a left hook sailing wide to hurt him, then speared the straight right straight down the pipe. His head snapped. 2 rows back, a photographer gasped before remembering to click the shutter. Referee Mercante prowled closer, one palm hovering, count silently rehearsed behind his stoic face. Bonavena's knees bent. In slow motion, it looked as though his skeleton questioned gravity, yet he refused to fold. He clinched, chest heaving, eyes suddenly wet, not with tears, but something more primal. Awareness. Layla felt the pulse of his heart against her forearms. It beat like an alarm announcing the future would arrive without him. She waited for the break, listened to Mercante's command, then stepped back, breathing steady through her nose. From ringside, Ali's tenor floated, unexpectedly soft, as if he read scripture. "Gentle now, baby. Show 'em how a storm lets up." 5th round dissolved into fragments of music and impact. Bonavina's offense became a metronome stuck on single notes. She saw every shoulder twitch before the punch, every slight hitch in his trunk rotation, and answered with combinations that wrote her surname in invisible ink across his torso. Right hook dug, left uppercut lifted, body shot bent him. Her wrists buzzed from each collision, yet her lungs felt clear, sparking with the fever of momentum. The garden spectators stopped chanting and simply watched, the collective realization dawning that spectacle had become history. At the bell, Bundini's laughter broke through, wild and delighted. On her stool, Angelo pressed ice above her ear, where a glancing shot had left a bruise, speaking in a hush meant for father and daughter both. "One more gear," he said, just enough to make the old man smile. Ali didn't smile, though. He leaned in, touched her glove with a fingertip, and whispered Arabic she had only ever heard during Ramadan prayers. The cadence translated itself inside her bones. Intention becomes destiny once spoken aloud. She stood before the seconds expired. Round 6 opened and ended on the same breath. Layla feinted jab, rolled under Bonavina's desperate cross, let the mat rebound her weight, then uncoiled a left hook that cracked across the Argentine's cheek, the very spot Barber's razor had already wounded. Skin split, blood sprayed in a crescent. His body pitched backward, equilibrium abandoning ship. He hit the canvas with a thud swallowed by gasps. Mercante swept Layla to a neutral corner, count aching through the hush. 1, 2. Bonavina's gloves pawed at Matt, but his limbs behaved like garments on wire hangers. 7, 8. He rose half a heartbeat late, accounts and careers share the same indifference. Mercante waved his arms. Garden lights flashed, fans surged as though oxygen had been laced with thunder. Layla did not raise arms. Instead, she walked to Bonavina, rested her glove on his shoulder, and said something only he could hear. His eyes softened, the tiniest nod, acknowledgement of code shared between warriors. Reporters wouldn't catch it. Cameras couldn't crop it. Yet that small exchange would drift through gyms for decades like cigar smoke. Back in the dressing room, a hush replaced the arena's roar, broken only by the peel of tape from wrists. Angelo cleared reporters out for 10 quiet minutes. Ali approached, holding that velvet pouch again. He opened it but kept the metal inside, tilted so the gold faced her. "Rome belonged to me," he said, voice raspy with pride and erosion alike. "But what you did out there just annexed tomorrow." She brushed a fingertip across the metal's cool surface, yet felt her own pulse echoing warmer. "Legacy is a relay," she answered, words emerging before she knew she owned them. "Today I carried the baton." Ali's laugh rumbled, then cracked with emotion he rarely exposed. He closed the pouch, slid it back into his coat pocket, and kissed her forehead the way he used to before elementary school drop-offs in Louisville. As photographers re-entered yelling for quotes, she squeezed Angelo's forearm, thanks without words, and looked once more at the tunnel that led to the ring, now empty save for janitors sweeping peanut shells. Resin still hung in the air, glowing like gold dust in the fluorescence. She inhaled, let it fill every alveolus, then exhaled softly. Somewhere beyond those walls, morning papers were being typeset, headlines aligning, skeptics erasing question marks. But here in this corridor, time felt paused, waiting for her to define its next rhythm. Layla tightened the belt of her coat, stepped forward, and the echo of her footsteps wrote the prologue to an era that hadn't existed until she decided to enter it swinging.